Jay Anderson founded the channel on Project Unity back in 2019. Yeah. And has amassed a significant following for his insightful interviews and incisive, independent analysis of current events and leading-edge topics. His work shot into prominence early on with scoops and exclusives surrounding the leak of the now world-famous Wilson Davis notes, which, amazingly enough, were entered into the congressional record in May of 2022. His work continues to innovate and inspire due to his fearless engagement with his singular perspective, which often challenges conventional thinking and consensus culture. We didn't come to contact in the desert to hear the same old perspectives, did we? So please put your hands together and help me welcome to the stage Jay Anderson.
Thank you, Jay. I've had a pretty wild few years. As Jay said, I started my YouTube channel, Project Unity, in 2019. And the impetus behind that, the reason why I even started the channel was because I had my own experiences with the phenomena. And I say phenomena, not phenomenon, because I think it's a spectrum. I think there's a whole bunch of different things going on when it comes to this. And for me, the keystone is consciousness. That's why it's the UFO consciousness connection. And it's an interesting one because, you know, when I look at the synchronistic, and I think a lot of people, if anyone here is an experiencer of this kind of stuff, like the synchronicities that seem to occur prior to an experience, like the build-up, and you look back and you go, oh, wow, this led to this, and now I'm having these experiences. It's a very common thing. And that happened to me. So I'm 29 years old now, but when I was in my last year of university, I think at the age of 21, just to take things back to before I had a YouTube channel, because I think it's important to kind of lay the groundwork of why I even got into this, and I think people can relate to this. When I was about 21, I was like any 21-year-old, you know, pretty lost in life, just trying to figure things out. I was going for university, studying TV and film production, and a lot of things happened at that point, which I now look back on as catalysts, but not all catalysts are positive at the time, right? They can be negative ones as well, and that's where it was for me. It was a bit of a time of depression, and I didn't have like a spiritual sense or anything like that. The things that I'm talking about now, I wasn't talking about that at this point. And you know, it got to a point at this age where my dad was actually a bit worried about me, and he was out in France at the time. He messaged me. He was like, "Look, I want you to come out. I want you to decompress, come and chill with me in the French countryside for a bit. I think you need it." And I did. I did need it. So I went to France, and when I'm out there, said to me, "Now, I've been reading these books, and I really, really think you should listen to them. I've got them on audiobook. I think they do you a lot of good. Now, I'm not here to preach a book to you and say that this is the way, but this was a very interesting kind of novel pathway that put ideas into my head that I didn't have before." So I'd like to get a raise of hands if you've ever read the book series Conversations with God by Neil Donald Walsh. Okay, so a few of you, yeah. I actually had the privilege of interviewing him afterwards, which was for me a big deal because these books completely brought me out of that depression. That was the first point of synchronicity for me. And the reason why was because they introduced this kind of model of God that I'd never really thought of, this model of a universal consciousness, animism, the awareness of everything on the absolute fundamental levels of reality, that everything is conscious, the air between us and all of us in this room. And it was an interesting kind of change of how I viewed the world. No UFOs at this point, no interest in that kind of stuff, but I started going down, because these books had such a significant effect on bringing me out of a bit of a depression, it sent me down the route of wanting to learn more. So I started reading more about consciousness, about philosophy, about quantum mechanics, seeing these kind of things and how they mold together. And they all seem to be talking about the same thing, just through different lenses, different ways of perceiving reality, whether it's science or spirit. And so, a couple of years doing that research, then I find myself kind of going into another depression, you know? Reason being this time was that I kind of felt like, you know, I've got a lot of information, I've learned a lot, or at least I feel like I've learned a lot, and I think I've come to some conclusions about reality in the bigger picture, but actually, you know, I still got to pay my bills, I'm still stressing about this, that, the other, my day-to-day life is still stressful. How do I kind of reconcile these big picture ideas that seem to be so inviting with my daily life, you know? So I was sitting on my bed one night, and I just kind of out loud had a little, you could call it a prayer, but I was just talking out loud to the universe, just sitting on my bed and said, look, I think this is all real, the universe being conscious, and that we're an element of that experiencing itself. Like Carl Sagan said, we're a way for the universe to know itself, right? I think all of that's real. But my life is still stressing me out. Give me something. Seriously, please just give me something that's real, that I can work with, something that I can see, experience. This is what I was saying. I was just sitting on my bed saying, look, I'm ready. I really do think these are actionable concepts, but I need some proof now. About a week later, my best friend, he was like, hey, and again, not part of the UFO community at this point, he was like, hey, you've got to check out this documentary. I was like, okay, what is it? It's called Unacknowledged by this guy called Dr. Stephen Greer. And I was like, okay, all right. So we put this documentary on, and it's kind of my first intro into the UFO subject. You've got these Minutemen missile launch officers and people high up in the intelligence community talking about their experiences. You've got the documents coming out, and I was sitting there going, wow, this is actually, looks like there's something legit with this UFO thing, I guess. So I started paying attention, and I was interested. But it was at the end of that particular documentary, and Dr. Greer's got a controversy within the community. People are split into pretty significant camps. So I try not to do that. I think there's, bits and pieces around everywhere. Try and just pick all of it and examine it closely and scrutinize things. But Dr. Greer, he talks about CE5, this concept that you can actually get into meditative states of consciousness, and if you're in a coherent, intentional state and you project your intentions that you want to have some sort of benevolent contact, some sort of peaceful contact, that this will happen. Now, at the time, and it's funny because reflecting back, maybe my opinions have changed, or at least my kind of assuredness of what it was has maybe shifted, but at this time, because I was sitting on my bed the week prior, and I was asking the universe for something that I could do, suddenly there's this guy saying, hey, here's something you can do. Get into these meditative states, project your intentions, things turn up. So this was in summer of 2019. I literally just felt like that was a message from the universe, I was so sure of it. And I actually think that is what played a key role in me having these experiences, because the more I've spoken to people, intention, and it's a bit of an awkward one, especially for skeptics and debunkers, because I don't want to say faith, but there is a level of when you believe something, strange things happen. And I really believed that it was possible for me to get into these states, project my intentions, and maybe something would actually be able to perceive that. So initially, when I started going out into literally just my back garden at night, and it was summertime in the UK, and trust me when I say England is not known for its warm weather, but we were lucky and we had some nice warm evenings. So I was out there and I was just getting into, and again, I'm not a meditation yogi or a practitioner or an expert. This is also what drove me to talk about it, because I was just like, well, I'm just a normal guy. If I can do this, all of you can do this. That's what really inspired me. I started going out into my garden, getting into just a calm, in through the nose, out through the mouth kind of breathing technique, just reduce the chatter. And I just started formulating my thoughts based on these concepts that I was learning about. Is there something out there that actually believes that the universe is a conscious, holographic projection, a simulation, something that is fundamentally based in awareness, and that love is a very powerful force, very powerful transcendental force? If there's anything out there that feels that, turn up. I'm ready. I want to see it. Now, I've watched the sky all my life. I love it. I used to lie down in the field with my dad or my mom and watch the satellites, and so I've always looked at the sky. We have a lot of satellites in the sky now, so it can be difficult. You always got to be discerning. Good to have a satellite tracking app and things like that, so you can dismiss ones that are just prosaic. But what happened to me initially was I started seeing a massive influx of satellites. Satellites with quotation marks, because they look like them, but way too many. I'm talking 20, 30 within the space of 5 minutes, just coming across the sky in different directions. And that was the first kind of, is this something? Could be. I'm going to keep going, keep trying. And it's a bit like a progression. Hang on. Can you all hear me properly? Yeah? We good? Just want to make sure. it definitely feels like it's a progression because it started off very lightly with these kind of satellite type objects. Then it changed to satellite objects coming over. Suddenly they'd glow very brightly and flash, and then recede back down. And they wouldn't do that just once. They do it a number of times. Now, I know about iridium flares, and satellites can catch the sun, and you get a bright flash. That's something that a lot of the time, people who are really into those kind of things, tracking satellites, they have to actually be out at a very specific time to track it, make sure they catch that iridium flare. I was seeing 15 of these things that were coming over and doing these flashes. And you know, whether it's just my interpretation, it seemed to be very coincidentally in response to a thought, you know, sending out hello, are you here for me? Flash. You know, how do you interpret that, especially when it's happening consistently? So this really started to interest me, and I was pretty confident that this was starting to become novel, that this wasn't just, you know, prosaic satellites flying over the sky. And it's actually a really well-known phenomena within the whole CE5 or HICE, human-initiated contact community, called flashbulbs, you know? And I would see ones that would just flash in a completely dark sky, full of stars, no discernible object, bright white flash. You look up at the sky, kind of send a thought, you know, project a thought, however you want to visualize that. Another flash. Same space, not moving, completely static, no object. What is that? Very common, really common. So many videos of this. It's funny, you know, because like a lot of people go, oh, where's the evidence for all this CE5? And there's actually a lot of night vision captures. Groups out there, they've been doing it for years, you know? And it's kind of impossible to dismiss every single aspect of the evidence that's been presented. So if you dig deep, you can find pretty interesting videos out there. And so I was doing this for quite a while, you know, throughout the summer of 2019, consistently going out, seeing these flashes, seeing a lot of things traversing the sky. But it was in August of 2019 when I had a series of experiences with, for lack of a better term, orange orbs of light. And this was extremely visceral and could not be denied and brushed away, all right? You know, you could maybe look at these flashes and say, oh, you know, it could be something, might be something. This was undeniable. So I'm looking up at the sky. I'm in my house. Oh, not in my house. I'm in my back garden. My house is over here. And I'm just doing my usual routine at this point, which is to just get into this kind of light meditation, breathing exercise, calm myself down, and just start to formulate my thoughts around the idea that I want something to turn up, and I want something to turn up that actually resonates with the things that I believe are representative of reality. You know, even if I'm wrong, they still turned up, so I don't know. maybe I figured it out. I'm not saying that, though. I was looking up at the sky. I saw a flash of light, which would become quite common to me at this point. So I was just like, oh, here we go. There's another flash. And then it flashed again, and then again, and then again. And then it started coming down. So every time it flashed, and there was no object. It was just a flash of light. Once it stopped, you couldn't actually see anything. So it would flash, and then it came down again. Flash, it came down, flash. And eventually it stopped above two stars. It kind of formed the apex of a triangle. It just 2 stars here, and it was about there, and it just kept flashing. So I was watching that for a while and was interested, but it was there for about 5 minutes, and I started going, well, thanks, but I'm going to kind of keep looking around the sky, and I'll keep my eye on you, but I'm going to, you know, keep looking around, see if there's anything else. So this is happening up here, and I turn my head, and I do a bit of a double take, because it's a crystal clear sky. As I'm turning my head, there's a dark cloud, but I kind of go past that. I'm just looking around, I look back, and that's when I look at this cloud properly. The only way I can describe it is that this was a cloud that had an overlay of light TV static. There was like a shimmer to the cloud. It was dark, and it looked energetic. It was shimmering. That caught my attention. And if we pretend this is my house, and I'm at the back of my garden, this cloud is coming across in this kind of trajectory. So it's naturally just going to go past my house, off in that direction. And again, I'm standing at the back. What it does when it gets to here is it does an alarming 90-degree turn and starts coming towards me. Yeah, wasn't ready for that. It's funny, isn't it? You know, you're out there projecting your intentions. Turn up, then they turn up. You're like, oh my God, like, no, I don't know if I actually wanted this. maybe I made a mistake. Yeah, exactly, bro. It's all becoming very real. But no, so this cloud did, I'm serious, it literally just went like that, like complete change. So I'm looking at this cloud coming up, and it's going to be above my head in a minute. And I honestly was like a rabbit in headlights, like shocked, stunned, in awe, not scared, just frozen in place. And again, this is another one of those things that, debunkers like, why didn't you film it? It's like, bro, I was looking at a staticky cloud. I did not have time to be like, unlock my phone. Like, no, you're not thinking that way. You really are not. And I'm sure anyone here who's an experiencer understands you're not thinking that way because it's such a novel thing. It's a reality breaker. So just like a rabbit in headlights, you're just there staring, taking it in. You can't really tear your eyes off of it. So this dark, staticky, weird cloud is coming up. It gets directly above my head, and it just sucks into itself in a matter of seconds, and inside it was a triangle formation of about 25 or 30 orange orbs of light in a complete triangle formation. It didn't stop, so this cloud was coming over. It did this complete reveal directly above me and continued on, so I had to look as it just went off into the distance. But this was a fairly sizable triangular formation. Now, I don't think it was a vehicle because I could actually see some of these orbs swapping positions in this formation as they kept moving on. But, the funny thing is, this is something that I've kind of almost tried to dismiss. I have brought it up before on my YouTube channel early on, just because I guess there's a part of me that isn't quite sure what to think of it. But the very next morning, after having this experience of seeing this triangular formation of orbs, I was coming out of the shower and I was just drying myself off, and immediately there was which has now been replaced by this tattoo, but there was a triangle formation of 3 dots, equilateral, in this red mark. And it was really prominent. Like, in the moment I dried my arm, I was like, whoa, what is that? And I've got photos of it, so you can see it on my YouTube channel. You have to dig a little deep because it's been a while since I've talked about it. What's weird about these marks is that they lasted for a year, and there was no skin trauma, there was no scabs, there was no itching, there was no bumps, it wasn't bug bites. It was shiny, like a cauterized skin, like a burn that's healed, and you get that sheen. But it was literally the next day. It wasn't on my arm before. I would have noticed it. And it lasted for a year. And there's a lot of people who've said, you need to do regression. You need to have a regression session. And I'm just kind of like, I don't know if I want to. Like, some things might be better left unanswered. But there's an element of me that's a little bit, uncertain of what that really represents. But it was an interesting data point that people have picked up on. And, a lot of people are convinced that there may be some missing time involved in that. I'll be honest, I don't really remember going to bed. I remember calling my mom and telling her about the experience. I don't really remember going to bed, so it's possible. It was also in 2019, and I haven't got the best memory, so it could just be that. But that wasn't the only time I saw these orbs. That was just the first time. I saw them 3 other times, and I think I would have seen them more, but I kind of fell off the path with this stuff for a little bit, which is just it's the way life works. You can't be resonating at love, light, unity consciousness at all times. I think I just had a few lucky moments of purity. But, life is tough, and it's difficult to stay on that kind of path. And I think if you're not resonating with a very pure intention, I don't think you should be doing that stuff, because it's very subtle. And I do believe in the whole kind of as above, so below. There are things below us, there are things above us. It is something to take into account when you're considering making these types of attempts at contacting the unknown, the anomalous, the other. In fact, when I first started doing this and was talking about it, it didn't take long before a guy who was not pretending, but claiming, I kind of feel like he might have been pretending, claiming to be in the NSA, and he got in touch with me. And I actually shared this source with Ross Coulthart, which I'm sure a lot of you know about Ross. And we're still both scratching our heads over this guy, because he had a lot of knowledge. He was a bit shady. A lot of these people are, like when in the IC, when they come out and they start communicating with people in the research field, it's difficult to know who to trust. Very difficult. But he was saying to me early on, you got to be careful here. You're You know, you're basically broadcasting on all frequencies and just hoping that whatever swims up is friendly. And I was like, you know, be careful of staring into the void might stare back at you, that kind of thing. I don't think it works that way. I do think it works on thresholds of intention. So if you're out there summoning dark forces, then yeah, you're probably going to get them. But if you're not doing that, if you're actually resonating at a really pure intention, you're feeling the love, you're feeling grateful to be alive, you're just curious, you want to see something, I don't think those orange orbs were malevolent, especially because it's led to me standing here right now, which I can't believe I'm doing. So I had a number of experiences. The second time I saw them, this was all within the space of about a month. The second time I saw them, it was another formation, no cloud this time. I was out in my garden looking up at the skies, doing my routine once again, and I just saw it in my peripherals, this little blur, and I looked over, and there was like a W formation of these orbs this time, with a couple of them trailing off at the back, and it just traversed the skyline. Just came across maybe 5 seconds or less, and that was it. And I was just, again, blown away, completely stunned. No time to film it, just quick traversal, and that was it. The third time, which I really wish I'd filmed, they came down pretty low. The third time, I was looking up at the sky, and again, weirdly enough, they came from the left each time. I don't know if that's anything to read into, but they always came from the same angle. I saw this blur of light. Again, I looked up, I saw 3 of these orbs coming across the sky very quickly, and then they just stopped on a dime directly, I mean, at least from my perspective, above my house, right? They came across and just stopped. And then I could kind of see that they were moving around, similar to how that triangle formation, they were swapping places. These 3 orbs were moving around. And then I noticed that they were actually descending. And again, my heart's starting to beat. You know, it's so funny. It's like this false sense of, I guess ego. Like, I want to be an ambassador. And then they turn up and you're like, I don't know if I'm ready to be an ambassador. Like, you know, this is starting to get very real. But no, these orbs were coming down from the sky. And they were rotating around each other in this weird, hypnotic fashion, just coming down like this. I was just staring at them as they were coming down. Again, if we pretend this is my house, they froze 2 feet, 3 feet above the roof of my house. They were basketball-sized, roughly, slightly transparent, orange orbs of light. Weirdly enough, they weren't actually scattering any light onto the roof, even though it was a ball of light. It should be reflecting, surely. So there's some exotic phenomena going on there. And I haven't discarded the idea, and if anyone's familiar with the Buddhist term of a tulpa, it's a psychic projection, you know, that you've actually coaxed this out of existence for your own purposes. It may not even be observable to someone standing next to you. I've entertained that concept. It could be that. But there have been some pretty interesting videos of orange orbs. There's a woman called Linda A. Roja, I think. She's got a kind of hard-to-spell name, but she captured one of the best videos. And if you do go on my YouTube channel, Project Unity, and just look for the ones where I'm talking about my CE5 experiences, I include the clip, because those are legit. That is 100% what I saw. So these orbs, they came down, they froze above the roof of my house, maybe loitered there for 5 seconds. Then they start this movement again. They're rotating, they lift up, and they go over to my neighbor's garden. God knows what would happen if my neighbor had come out. It's like, what are you doing, Jay? Just summoning orbs, you know, nothing big. No big deal, dude. Like, you know, go back to bed. Yeah, it's kind of funny because I live in a pretty residential area, so I've got neighbors on both sides. And at this point, I've lived there for a while. They're so used to me doing these crazy interviews. But at the time, I was super I can't, you know, I don't want people to know I'm kind of up to this stuff. But they went over and they hovered over my neighbor's garden and they just froze again. They went over and just boop, and stayed there for a few seconds, maybe 4 or 5 seconds, started this rotation again, started lifting up, moving up, until I couldn't see them anymore. Then the 4th time I saw them, they flew across the sky. This is all within the space of a month or less. They flew across the sky in a V formation with a couple trailing off at the back. So W with a couple trailing off, V with a couple trailing off, a triangle, and then 3 of them, which is also a triad, and then the triangle on my arm. So there was a lot of symbology involved, in my opinion, that I haven't deciphered. I just have a feeling that there is something trying to be said to me here about perhaps mind, body, spirit. These are just the ideas that are floating around in my head. I truly don't know. You know, my position here is that I don't have, knowledge on the Galactic Federation or any of that kind of stuff. I don't know what we're dealing with, really. I have ideas. I have desires of what I would like it to be, but I won't pretend to have the answers. I've come into this looking for answers, and I have a heck of a lot more questions, over the years. But when this happened to me, it had a drastic effect. I would even go as far as to say that there was a level of neural plasticity. It changed the way that I thought. Because suddenly I was able to stay up very late all night, reading about things that I couldn't really have understood before, deep into quantum physics and philosophies that I wasn't really able to grok prior to that. It really lit a fire up underneath me. And I think one of the main things for me was, again, I'm just a normal guy. I'm just a normal guy from the UK who was like a rock climbing instructor before this. I didn't have any interest, and it happened to me. So it can happen to you.